Nerd Morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and today on the Nerd Morning Show, we're going to be talking about the book Proven Guilty, which is the 8th book in the Dresden Files series. And this has been such a great journey to go through and reread these and to then share and talk about these books with you guys. This book is way good. It talks about like second chances. It has strong themes of friendship, and this book I think has a lot more heart in it than the previous Dresden Files books. I think that Jim Butcher has really continued growing as a writer and has really been able to find ways to include some strong emotional elements in this otherwise like stoic type character, as Harry Dresden tries to be this Lone Ranger capable individual, and he has been making connections with people, friendships over years. He's seen people grow and change, and that has all really started to kind of come together here. So before we get started, I want to give you guys a quick spoiler warning. I am talking openly about the book. So the story starts out with the White Council executing a young Warlock. So this young boy had been manipulating people and had been going into their minds and had started using these individuals to kill other people's really horrific stuff. And this was a really intense thing for him to see because it has parallel to his own life, his own experiences, as he had a young warlock trial and someone stood up for him and put themselves in harm's way to make it so he would then be only under the doom of Damocles, which would cause him to have like a one slip up, that's it kind of a situation. He messes up one time and he'd be executed, but he was able to learn and grow, and that was when Ebenezer McCoy comes into his life and guides him, teaches him, and then he grows out of that and starts on his own, has his own practice, and that's where we start to see him in the book 1. And now this just beautifully parallels his experiences on what could have happened to him. And it's, I think, a very powerful message to us as readers, and as we see how this moment here parallels later with what goes on with Molly, it is really impactful and powerful. And this story totally revolves around this beginning moment, which is a separate instance where the young warlock is executed, and tied in through Harry's experiences to Molly and her trial at the end of the story. After the trial, the gatekeeper, who is this like really mystic wizard who is on the council, goes up to him and warns him of there being black magic afoot in Chicago. And this is interesting because Bob speculates that there might be some time manipulation that's going on here to help Harry have a future that's guided a little bit different than where maybe the gatekeeper got that information from, without time travel. It was very interesting. It was a little bit confusing on how he was skirting around the time travel element while essentially gaining that information for Harry Dresden, but they kind of suggest that the reason why the gatekeeper was being somewhat cryptic is because he is trying to give Harry a different fate than what otherwise would have been. And the more you get to know the gatekeeper, the more you say he is kind of a step above these other wizards on the council on both skill and also just know-how. And he's a very likable character, but also like you don't know anything about him at this point, and it's fun because you see him being so other than Harry and also the White Council itself. He's also given this assignment to investigate what's going on with the Fae. They're needing help, but because of conflicts between the Fae, they are not being able to help the White Council. And the White Council right now is on this heavy war front between the Red Court of Vampires and themselves, the White Council. And this is the war that Harry himself started. So he's supposed to find out what's going on and if he can make anything better with that. So that's all the setup of all the things that are going on in this story. As we head out from there, we see Lashiel appearing again. We get this reminder of her presence and influence in Harry. And this is a very interesting relationship that they have. They seem to be able to have a working relationship to some degree, where Harry tries very hard to keep Lashiel's influence out, but Lashiel is also trying very hard to tempt him with knowledge and aid in order to be able to help other people, and she is known as this great temptress, and it's a very interesting dynamic that Harry has going on in his mind. Thomas is his roommate and is being far more put together than we saw him in the last book. And I think that's interesting to see him grow and change a little bit. But he's also being far more distant. With Karen, last time we saw that Karen and Harry were having, or at least Harry was having more feelings towards Karen than previously, and they have a little bit more of a friendly vibe in this book. So over the past year, they've been able to have positive connections and other types of things. And pretty much these books are kind of like in a year's time. Like, one time in the year, the world is practically exploding, and that's the time that we get to see what's going on with Harry. And the rest of the time, it's relatively calm. And so those are kind of the status of some of these major characters that we are interacting with. One of the things that Harry has been doing that's pretty interesting is he has been building a mini Chicago, essentially using the same type of magical theory of like a little doll representing a human, and then someone being able to affect the little doll and it affecting the human. What he's doing is he's trying to use this mini Chicago in a way that he can locate things and interact with the main size of Chicago, and this to maybe help him with his fact gathering as a detective, and so forth. And here he's going to try to utilize this to see if he can go and identify where the black magic has been or is being used inside of Chicago, so he can put a stop to it, and thus serving that first phase of the story. While he's doing that, Molly calls him. He gets all distracted and isn't able to really continue with that practice, and goes out to apparently bail her out of jail, which actually ends up being her boyfriend. And we find that there are some things afoot, and Harry goes to try to investigate that, which is going to be at SplatterCon! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And I like how he mentions that if there's not 3 exclamation points, it's spelled wrong, which I think is great. We also, with Molly and the interactions there, Molly is definitely growing up. She has this kind of goth vibe going on, and apparently has left home and has separated ties from her family. But the Carpenter family is a big important part of Harry Dresden's life, and apparently he has not been really making a lot of connections with them over the past couple years since he's picked up Lashiel's coin, and with that essentially been tainted by the Denarius. And because Michael Carpenter is one of the Knights of the Cross, whose sworn job is to deal with those beings, he has tried to stay away, but he feels like it's important for them to go there and take Molly to the family, because she had just been at the prison and there was all this stuff going down, and it was the right thing to do. So he goes there. Molly and Charity are fighting. There's some crazy tension there in the home, and he's surprised by this because they have previously been such a great place of love and unity, and a home that for him as an orphan would have envied. And here, seeing that tension is not something he really likes seeing, but also is kind of like, I'm not being involved. Michael asks him to get involved, though, and talk to Molly if he can, because he feels like Molly would maybe listen to him and to see if they can help them resolve some of those issues while he heads off on a mission that he's being called away to as a Knight of the Cross. So he has to now help deal with some of those problems. This being family troubles, very different scale than monsters and ghouls, and it's kind of interesting to see him worried and concerned about these types of elements rather than monsters and ghouls, which in some ways he's more comfortable with, which is just an interesting contrast, and I think also interesting to see how his mental state is as he has grown up, been an orphan, and dealt with all those types of things. We finally get to SplatterCon. SplatterCon is essentially this convention where people are cosplaying, they're doing horror movies, all these types of things in the pop culture subgenre of horror. There's these creatures that are coming out looking like monsters from these horror movies who are actually attacking different individuals there at the convention. We meet Officer Rollins, who seems to be a really upstanding cop and lets Harry kind of take a peek into the crime scenes, but is trying also to hold by the letter of the law. We find that there are phobophages, and that's what the monsters are. Essentially monsters that are feeding off of the fear of the different individuals there and are seemingly targeting some individuals who had been affected by mind manipulation and have thus been damaged and scarred spiritually, and these phobophages have been going towards them and then also feeding off of everyone else's fear around these individuals. I think that's a really interesting element, and that worked out, I think really, really well for the story and for monsters to fight. That way you could have these scary movie monsters, but they also were tied into the logic of the world, and I think Jim Butcher did a really good job of dealing with wanting to include some of these types of things without damaging the integrity of the world that he created inside of his urban fantasy. One of the big moments in all of this stuff is Harry and Karen have this DTR moment where they determine their relationship, and Harry kind of says, I think that we could maybe make a go of it, and then Karen says, I think that you're an amazing person, but I don't think that we could give each other really what we want. And so they remain friends, but they also find that they are both interested in each other. And it was just a really interesting moment where, again, Harry is faced with issues of the heart, issues with friendship, issues with connections with people, rather than just monsters. And I liked this about this book as well. Another moment here during the convention, we find that these FBI agents are illegally interrogating Molly, and he goes in there and helps protect her and gets her out of an unsafe situation. He's in a hotel room. She comes in to try to clean up before meeting back with her mom, and there is some misunderstandings there. Harry gets punched in the face. He totally deserves it. But also we kind of see a lot of hints here that Molly has a crush on Harry, and this is a problematic situation for sure. Harry tries to deal with the different phobophages. He gets attacked. Mouse gets hit by a car, which is the most tragic moment of this entire book. We find out he is okay. Mouse, the dog, is fine. Remarkably, because he's a magic dog, if you haven't figured that out already. And he is being captured up by this white court vampire who, rather than feeding off of energies of lust and desire, is feeding off of fear. And this horror convention being a very ideal place for him to be. And Harry is captured, beaten, and is being sold on eBay to all of these different enemies that he has faced in previous stories. I think the hero being eBayed out is kind of a really funny element. I love this moment. It was just a really interesting story point. He escapes and goes after the phobophages, sends them out to the person who essentially called them forth at the beginning, and finds out that the Carpenter house has been attacked and Molly has been taken. Essentially, we find that Molly is a magic user, has been doing the mind manipulation, has been causing all of these troubles, and she is essentially ignorant about all the problems, and Harry has to go in there and save her, but also because she has done that mind manipulation, she would be classified as a warlock and would be executed by the White Council. So he has to rescue her, and then he has to rescue her. So she has been taken into Fairy, and they get the help of Fix and Lily, who is the Summer Knight, and Summer Lady, the lowest level of the queens in the Summer Court of Fairies. And these Fae go and help him to find a location and to get to the place in Fairy that Molly is being held. Now, when we open up the gateway, we find that it is actually Arctis Tor, the stronghold, the heart of the land of winter in the land of Fairy. And this means that Lily and Fix aren't really able to be super helpful because this is the heartland of the opposite side of the coin when it comes to the peoples of Fairy. And so they go in and essentially open up the gateway, and we have Harry, Thomas, Karen, Charity Carpenter, Molly's mom, who are going in there to fight and try to rescue Molly, who had been taken. During all of this combat, we find a really interesting phobophage, kind of like a master phobophage, the Scarecrow. And Scarecrow and Harry have this epic battle where he's trying to rescue Molly. It's super crazy, but there is this little butterfly guide that the Summer Lady, gave him to help him fight off the cold, as well as make it so they would be able to be guided to the right direction. And he uses the butterfly to claim the magic from it, and then uses that to channel the fire of summer in the winter's stronghold. And essentially, with the conflict, he actually shoots the fire in the wellspring of winter, and this causes all of winter, all of the fairies of winter, to react very strongly, because there's essentially an attack from summer in the heart of winter, and they're all rushing in order to be able to catch these guys to kill them. So this is interesting because it connects back to the problems that the White Council had, to investigate what's going on with the fairies, to see how they can get help. And one of the things is that they had this even conflict between them, but because all of winter retreated in order to be able to deal with what was going on because of Harry and the stronghold, thus summer was able to assist the White Council during this big battle against the Red Court vampires, and the day is saved all on this other side. And so there's some other things that are going on, and Harry really realizes that the Fae have been essentially taking advantage of Molly and the Carpenters and his sense of duty and protection in order to accomplish some things, and he has been played by them. And so he's not super excited about it, but he rescued the girl, Molly is safe, and they get out of there. And finally we get to this point where Harry has to talk to Molly about what she did. They have the magic talk. He talks about the White Council, about the laws of magic, and essentially that Molly is kind of doomed and needs to be saved, because if she continues on the path that she is going, she will be a warlock and doing some really, really bad things. And they do this soul gaze, and the soul gaze is a really interesting thing that we've had since book one, where a wizard looks into the eyes of somebody and is able to see that person, or who they are, and everything's kind of laid bare. And in turn, they look at him and see him for all he is. And he looks at Molly and sees like these multiple paths. And I love this imagery because one, we actually see a path that Molly follows later in life. Spoilers there. But there's like these 5 different paths, and one can be a really heroic individual. There's some connections with the Fae, with the White Council. We see her kind of as a regular human, but powerful. And then we see her as a powerful and scary warlock. And so there's this like different like options that she has before her, ultimately saying that she gets to choose her future. And I think that's an important thing, that even though we are who we are right now, our futures are open to us, and we get to choose the path that we want to follow. And she is definitely given this opportunity. But because of this, the way that he sees it is she needs to go into the White Council of her own free will and then be put on trial, just like the very beginning, and then ultimately try to make it so he can be her mentor and protect her under the doom of Damocles, where if she messes up, they would both be killed. So they get there at the trial, and pretty much no one is there. We have the Merlin, which is like the ruler of the White Council, and we have a couple of other individuals, but no one who's really protective or on the side of Harry. And it looks like it's not going to go well. In fact, Merlin says, we need to execute this person, and Harry's like last moment gambit, he makes sure that everyone gets a vote on the council, and the gatekeeper hasn't really voiced anything yet. And so he says, I need to think about this, give me a moment. And during that waiting, we get these other people who come there. Also, what had happened a little bit earlier in the meeting is Harry brought in the Summer Knight and also the Summer Lady to declare their valor and to essentially say what happened on Arctis Tour, in order to be able to help him kind of get some street cred, in order to help him say, I'm worthy of being able to take on an apprentice, and that I should be considered like I'm a sound, wise individual, in order to be able to give him a little bit of a leg up as possible during this trial. But ultimately, all of those gambits did not work, and the gatekeeper's waiting was the thing that saved the day, as the rest of the council show up with Michael Carpenter, Molly's father, who is the Knight of the Cross, who went off on this mission. And this was an interesting thing because we get our heroes into a situation where they cannot get out of. And then magically, their problems are solved by the council and Michael showing up. And we get essentially a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina moment. And like, Deus Ex Machina is a term that's used for essentially escape from an impossible situation. Kind of derives from that Greek and Roman like storytelling where the gods would go in there and essentially fix everything for the mortals, and it's kind of like the escape that isn't well deserved. And I think here we get a very different type of experience, but it is kind of like reminiscent of a Deus Ex Machina, and that is because we have all of this setup, the things that Harry did inside of Arctis Tour was the stuff that directly related and solved this other problem. And so we have this payoff that though they get this moment of this like miraculous save, they paid for it earlier in the story in order to be able to receive that payoff, that protection, that reward that ultimately saves Molly Carpenter's life. I think that that was really, really well written. And when I see like these like Deus Ex Machina like situations inside of stories, it's really a letdown and a disappointment because you don't feel like they earned it. And here, Jim Butcher really makes you feel like even though they got this miraculous save, that it was earned and it was worthwhile. Ultimately, there's some conversations about a Black Council conspiracy and how there's all of these things that are like lining up from the beginning of this series to the end. Everything that's going on so far since the first story is essentially maybe more connected than we thought. And I love how that they've been like giving us these little bits in the stories so far, because they've been hinting at things like that about there being more connections and having callbacks and other types of stuff throughout all of the books. And really, these are pretty episodic stories. If you, particularly the first couple books, were to read them out of order, you'd probably be okay. Like, they do build off of each other, but they are pretty self-contained stories. And they're, with that episodic flavor, having this overarching feeling that they are connected is really, really satisfying in the continuity of the world, and kind of as a satisfaction as a reader. Also, we get the first lesson that we have between Molly and Harry, as Harry is going to be the new mentor. And essentially, the big first lesson that Molly learns is that though she may have some romantic feelings with Harry, it's never going to happen, and that Harry is going to be a teacher and an educator, and that's it. And I think that that was really interestingly done, but was definitely a powerful scene. And it's interesting to see how Molly and Harry's relationship grows and changes and progresses in interesting ways as master and apprentice. And I love how that continues throughout the stories in the future. Molly is one of my favorite characters, and it's so cool that we get to see her really kick off her adventure and her growth in this book. Let me know what some of your favorite moments were of this book. Put those in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Also, what type of elements, themes, or other types of aspects of this book do you feel are like important, worthwhile? Put those in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can also connect with me on other social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and you can find me at all of those places at Nerd Morning. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.